Welcome. We'll be starting in about 8 or 9 minutes. Thank you for joining. I'll do introductions once we get started. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll be starting in about seven minutes or so. Good to have you. And I'm going to be presenting, just happy to chit chat a little bit, but we will be starting in 7 minutes or so officially. So welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Mishkin. Quick question. I know we're waiting for the rest of the team to officially start this. Will you be going through any of the tool that you would just demonstrate the real-time technique, like such as Jira, or would you be going through that?
I will be showing you one tool that I use and recommend, but I won't be going through multiple tools. It will just be the one tool. It's not Jira, it's a tool called Miro.
Miro, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I will be demonstrating a couple things quickly on that.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. So welcome to those who have arrived recently. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes officially, but if people have any questions or comments, I'm happy to have a quick discussion. This is open webinar in the sense that you're welcome to speak, although I will only be taking questions at the end. So texting questions in the Zoom chat is fine. I think I just contradicted myself. Anyway, the plan is to take questions at the end. We'll get started in about just a bit over 2 minutes. And I think what I'm going to do actually is make it so that everyone's muted until we get to the Q&A at the end. So. All right, we'll get started in about 1 minute. 1 minute we'll start. Welcome everyone who is here. We'll start in a few seconds. All right, so welcome everyone to the webinar Crash Course in Agile Estimation. My name is Mishkin Bertigue, and I will be taking you through the content today. I am the founder of Bertigue Consulting, and as I'm sure you're probably aware, we provide training, coaching, and consulting services to organizations around the world to help them with their Agile implementations, to become more effective in the way they work and so forth. This webinar is focused on the concepts of Agile estimation. We're going to look at the principles of Agile estimation and planning. We're going to quickly review 9 different estimation techniques to get you sort of aware of them. And then we're going to demonstrate 3 of the most effective techniques also very quickly. For this webinar, we are recording, and the recording will eventually be made available, although it usually takes us a little while to clean things up and so forth. Also, if you have any questions along the way, you can use the Zoom chat to ask questions at any time. I will try and answer some of them immediately. Some may have to wait until the end. So hopefully this is valuable to everyone. For what it's worth, I'm always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I was at your Crash Course in Agile Estimation webinar, and I'd like to ask more questions. I'm happy to do that through LinkedIn. So please do connect with me there. We're still getting people coming, but that's fine. I'm going to move on to these principles, and I'm just going to talk through these fairly quickly. Traditionally, estimation, well, this is interesting. Who is, okay, that's drawing lines. Okay, I need to stop that. How do I stop people from drawing lines? Actually, you know what? I've got a colleague, sorry, slight thing here. I'm going to just get my colleague Okay, Pedram, if you can sort out how to get people not drawing lines on the view, that would be great. Okay, so I think if I stop the share briefly and start it again, that will clear it up. Okay. So principles of agile estimation. First of all, in traditional organization, estimation is usually something where you have managers or executives or other stakeholders who want estimation to be good. They want it to be accurate. They want it to be done well. They want to be able to trust the estimates and often create contracts on the basis of those estimates, sometimes with clients, sometimes with vendors, and sometimes even internally. However, when we're in an agile environment in which the work is inherently complex, we have to embrace some different principles for agile estimation. Our estimation techniques need to be fast, and we are not as concerned about them being accurate. Why is that? Well, because if they are fast, then we don't waste time on estimation. Instead, we get into the work immediately. We don't worry about them being accurate because in complex environments, accuracy is not possible. In other words, the environment, the type of work that we're doing itself makes it so that we cannot be accurate. There's no magical technique that will make it accurate. This is about agile environments. So you use agile methods when you're doing complex work. Now, what else? So we also want to use techniques that are collaborative. In other words, we want multiple people to participate in the estimation efforts, and we want those techniques to result in unanimous or at least anonymous agreements. Why is this important? Because if we know that we're in an agile environment, well, these are principles of agility in general, but also because we never want to blame someone for a poor estimate. There should be no accountability for estimates. Instead, all we're looking at is, hey, let's get these done. Let's get them made so that we can start making some plans about action, but the estimates themselves are not that important. All right, final thing, and this is really the crux of it all. When we're talking about complex work environments, all estimates and plans are lies anyway. What do I mean by that? I mean that they will never come true, that when we make these estimates, we don't worry about the truth, and we have to accept that we're talking to people like our executives and saying, hey, you know what? We've made this plan, but we know that it's not going to come true. So why would we do this? Well, in general, people like estimates because they help us feel good, right? It feels good to be able to say, hey, we've got an estimate. We have some sense of the future. People like that sense of certainty. And that sense of certainty, we just have to be very clear, in an agile environment, that certainty is not real. And so that means that in order to do agile estimation and planning, we need to use some different kinds of techniques. So, super fast overview. We've got 9 different techniques that I'm going to describe very briefly. You might actually be familiar with some of these already. Okay, so number 1, planning poker. This is by far the most well-known agile estimation technique. Basically, you get a team together, a group of people together, everyone gets some votes, and the votes are basically these physical note cards that allow people to say, hey, I think this estimate is 5 hours or $50 or 10 points or whatever unit you're using. And the voting process allows the team to come to a unanimous agreement on an estimate for everything that you're estimating. There's lots of good reference information about this Wikipedia has good descriptions of this, so I'm not going to get into any more detail. The second one is called the bucket system. And the bucket system is a technique for a large number of people to estimate a large number of items. So, for example, in agile environments like Scrum, we often have a product backlog. And that product backlog might have 100, 200, 400 different items on it. And you need to find a way to estimate all of them quickly. The bucket system allows us to divide and conquer the estimation work. Basically, everyone takes a few minutes together to estimate a few items together. You have a discussion. But after that discussion, you use a physical layout to actually show where all the items are placed, and each person works independently to place items in these estimation buckets. If I remember correctly, this might be, yeah, this is one of the ones I'm going to demonstrate. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that either. Okay. Next one, big, uncertain, small. This is a categorization. Sometimes all you care about is knowing whether something is the right size or not. And so you focus on this idea of smallness and uncertainty and bigness. Now, interestingly, these two are almost the same. Now, I'm not going to say it aloud, but this F stands for a well-known English swear word, and too effing big, no effing clue, and one. So this estimation technique here is well known in a community of people who use hashtag no estimates. Basically, they say estimation is bad in general, but in fact, it is an estimation technique where you basically determine if a product backlog item is a 1. In other words, it fits into a sprint. Dot voting is another one that a lot of people are familiar with. In fact, Miro itself has a voting technique that you can use for dot voting. I'm not going to show this off, but it's very powerful for decision-making type estimates. How important is something for us to make a decision? And it's very fast, which is another advantage. Literally, you can do dot voting on a large number of items with 10 or 15 minutes and get results extremely quickly. T-shirt sizes is the idea of basically, hey, we're going to categorize things, but now we're not putting numbers on it, right? So small, medium, and large, right? What's the size? And of course, you can add like extra large and extra small on the other side. And the T-shirt sizes gives people a perspective on what's the size of these items relative to each other. Affinity mapping is a technique for saying all of these things are the same. Excuse me. So you might have 100 backlog items and you group them based on, hey, which ones are similar in size versus not. That's what the idea of the affinity is. It's the affinity to each other. Ordering protocol is a really cool one. Basically, you take a bunch of items and you go around in a circle. This works with a small number of participants. And you say, hey, here's the current order. Do you want to make any changes to it? And so someone might say, yeah, I'm going to move this one up to the top. And that's their thing. Then someone else takes a turn. They might say, you know what, I'm going to move this one into this position. Someone else says, no, you know what, this actually belongs at the bottom. Everyone takes a turn, and in their turn, they choose to make a move or not. And that move is their responsibility. When no one wants to make any moves, then you're done. Finally, and this is the simplest in many respects, basically you give people a bunch of items to estimate and you say, hey, look, we want all of these to be the same maximum size or less. So you could say something like, everything needs to be 1 day or less in size. And so they might look at an item and say, you know what, this is at least a month's worth of work. Let's split it up. Let's divide it into a whole bunch of different pieces until all of them are a day or less. And so then actually all you're doing is you're just counting how many items you have that are at that maximum size or less. Very, very simple technique. Now, so a couple comments, function points. Okay, why can't function points be used? So I'm going to say a few words to some of these questions. First of all, function points are useful, but they are complex. What I mean by that is it usually takes a lot of work to do function point estimating. In an agile environment, we want techniques that are super simple and super fast. We're not trying to be accurate. We're not trying to use statistics. We are in a complex environment. So we actually want to get our estimation done really quickly so that we just immediately go to action, that we're just doing stuff, building stuff and getting feedback. All right, so next question is related. If we don't have accurate estimates, how will we plan the overall schedule of the project? Well, okay, we don't need estimates to, we don't need accurate estimates to create a plan. We just need estimates. So if we know that someone has estimated something to be 3 days long, okay, great, keep that in mind in terms of your plan. However, is it actually going to be 3 days? Or is it going to be 3 hours or 3 weeks? In a complex environment, we don't know. So I want to be very clear. We can create a schedule, we can create a plan, but in an agile environment, we are constantly updating our plans. Every sprint, every iteration, every cycle, we update our plans because we are working with reality and getting constant feedback. I'll say a word about this, about the bigger picture of budgeting, for example. A lot of organizations are concerned about budgeting, and they are worried that without detailed plans and accurate plans, they won't be able to create a budget. You're right. This is a serious issue. And so it takes some different thinking about how budgeting works. You budget for teams to deliver over time. You don't budget for scope. Now, that's a little bit beyond the scope of our webinar. So I'm going to say, if you want to find out more about budgeting and planning, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to have a conversation about that. This is focused just on the estimation part. Okay. Can it be used for the story points taken in sprint? Absolutely. All of these techniques can be used for that. Sometimes you can do like the next question about averages. Yes, if a team works for a period of time, they work together, they measure their results, they can do a running average. But remember, we are not trying for accuracy. This is an important point in agile estimation. We are trying to get our work done. And our work is not estimates. Our work is delivering value. People who participate, usually it's the members of the Agile team. Now, there's a bunch of other questions that are coming. I actually want to go back to sharing my screen briefly to cover some of the example techniques in a little bit more detail. And then if there's time, I'll take more questions later. All right. So, the 3 most effective techniques. First of all, I want to demonstrate these in a simplified form, okay? This is not going to be an in-depth demonstration. And, you know, before we started, someone asked about tools. Not every tool supports every estimation technique. I'm going to be demonstrating everything here on my Miro board because that's the easiest way to do these demonstrations. But in reality, you might have, for example, Jira or Microsoft Azure DevOps that you're using as your tool. You will have to find out which particular techniques are supported by your tool, or you may have to add some tools. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate big, uncertain, small. I'm going to demonstrate the bucket system, and I'm also going to demo something that I haven't covered in the description earlier, which is of impact and effort estimation. All right, So big, uncertain, small. So the basic idea is that you have a bunch of PBIs, product backlog items, and typically in real life, you're going to have many dozens, possibly even hundreds. And you're going to get your team together to actually take these items and categorize them. So here we have a big space, an uncertain space, and a small space. The way this works is you start by having a discussion as a team. Hey team, which of these backlog items can we say are for sure, everyone agrees are small? So you might scan through them and you say, hey, this one, everyone agrees is small, okay? And so you just physically move it into that small category. Then you might also ask the question about, is there anything here that's big? And so let's say the team agrees this is big. Okay, now we have two product backlog items that are quote unquote estimated. But what does big and small mean? So this is an important part of this technique. You have to define those terms. So small might mean it takes our team 1 day or less to implement. Or it might even mean 1 week. But it's got to be small relative to the overall size of your team and your project or your work effort, okay? But you define it. So you might say, okay, this is small, and what we mean by that is 1 day or less of effort. Okay, so now the team has agreed. This product backlog item is 1 day or less. What does big mean? Well, big just means the opposite. It means more than 1 day. Definitively, absolutely, more than 1 day. Okay. Uncertain is everything else. Uncertain means, hey, it might be close to 1 day. We're not sure if it's less. We're not sure if it's more. It might mean that we don't even understand the product backlog item. Okay. So the team puts 2. Then what they do is they work independently. So let's say, for example, that I have 2 team members, and I will take some of these and I will categorize them. In the meantime, my other team members are working and they will put things in the buckets as well. Eventually, all of them will be put into the buckets. Now we have some estimates, okay? And we can use this for planning purposes, for short-term planning. What do I mean by that? Well, short-term, we know that anything that's here in the small bucket, we can do quickly. We can do in a day or less. And if our sprint is 1 week long, all 3 of these things should easily be accomplishable in our sprint. We also know, short-term planning, that we need to get more clarification about these product backlog items. So we might talk with our product owner, we might talk with our customers or our users to get more clarification. And finally, for the ones that are big, we need to plan some time to split them, to reduce them to smaller items so that we can work on them. Okay, so this is a technique that's very, very powerful. The final step of the technique, though, is just to do a sanity check. Everyone takes a look. Do they agree? Do they disagree? Let's say one of my team members says, you know what? No, this one, I don't think it's small. Okay, so then we have a discussion about it, and maybe we decide, okay, it goes into the uncertain category because we actually have to get some more data about it. All right, so that's the big, uncertain, small technique. Next technique. This is the bucket system. I mentioned this one. So this is similar in that we're getting a team to work together to do some estimation. Let's say for this one, we're going to estimate business value. Okay, so, whoops. So what these numbers mean then is a 0 means no business value. A 200 means lots of business value. You can think of this almost like business priority. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a bunch of business stakeholders together to categorize these product backlog items in terms of business value. Okay, so you do a couple together. It's often easy if you just choose one randomly and stick it in the middle. This way you've got a reference. Now you have a conversation with your business stakeholders. Hey folks, how much value does this product backlog item have compared to the one that we've put in the middle here? So maybe after a little bit of discussion, everyone agrees that it's a lot less value, okay? So instead of being 8 units of value, it's 2 units of value. Okay, then you take another one, have a discussion. How much value does this one have compared to that initial one? Let's say it's about, 5 times as much value. Well, we don't have 5 times. We don't have 40. We have 30 and we have 50. So then there's a bit of a discussion. Is it better to put in 30 or is it better to put in 50? And so let's say the group eventually agrees, we'll put it in 30. Now, just like with the previous technique, everyone works independently. So if I'm one of the stakeholders, I take this, I think about it, I put it where I think it belongs. At the same time, other stakeholders are taking the backlog items and putting them in the categories as well. It's of course fine for product backlog items to be in more than one category at the same time. And sometimes you'll have some that end up in the 0. All right. So after these are all categorized, again, just like with the previous technique, everyone does a few minutes of sanity checking just to make sure, understand, hey, we all agree this is reasonable. Now, in real life, just as guidance on this one, if you have, say, 200 items to estimate and you have 10 people to work on estimating, you should allocate approximately 30 minutes for this exercise. In other words, it's very fast, okay? You're estimating 200 items in 30 minutes. And so this is one of the reasons this is such a great agile estimation technique. All right, got some questions coming in. I'm going to get to the questions after looking at the third technique, and even if we have to go back to some of the other techniques. All right, third technique. So this is a multi-dimensional estimation technique. What that means is that we're not just estimating one thing at a time. We want to specifically get our group of people to collaborate on thinking about, hey, how much effort is this going to take and what is the impact of it in terms of positive impact. So this technique works just like all the others in that as a group you discuss a few. So maybe we say, okay, what on here is the biggest bang for the buck, the least effort and the most impact? All right, so let's say it's this one. The group agrees. Now, biggest bang for the buck means that it goes in the top right-hand corner. You'll notice that the effort arrow is pointing to the left, not pointing to the right. So what that means is that this is 0 or low effort, whereas at this end, we're talking about very high effort, okay? And that's the reverse of what you might normally expect. But this is important because we want our most impactful for the least effort to be in the top right-hand corner. We want to be able to say we're going up and away for choosing what to do. And that's the important thing about this technique, is it helps us make choices. All right, so we do one, we do another as a group, we get some references, and then like with the others, we divide and conquer. So people just work together to put the items into this visual space. Now, what do you do with this? The thing that's very powerful here is that you can actually draw a line, right? You can say 45-degree angle line here. Everything above this line is great. We know that the value of this in terms of impact versus the amount of effort, it's going to be a no-brainer. We're absolutely going to do these things. Then You might draw another line, also 45 degrees, and you say everything below this line is actually probably not worth the effort, right? Like the amount of business value we're going to get out of it, not worth it. Everything in the middle, we might need to do a little bit more analysis. We might need to have a conversation with business stakeholders. We might need to have a conversation with our team, but we have a way of categorizing these items basically based on return on investment. Okay, so top right corner is best. That's the stuff that we want to work on. And so when we think about estimation used for planning, what we would do is we would say, we're going to start in the top right-hand corner, do those, and then later on do those. And only if we really need to are we going to go further than that and do those. So you can almost think of it like sprints. Sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3. All right, so those are the techniques that I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about. I'm just going to zoom out here, and I'm going to look at our Q&A. So we're basically done the content. I know it's a super fast overview. I'm going to start going through the Q&A to answer some of the questions, but if people need to leave, they're welcome to. This is now officially done. I will include the Q&A in the recording. So if you can't stick around any longer, you will still be able to access it through the recording. All right, so typically which Agile, oh, I already answered that. So does estimation have any impact on velocity of sprint? Okay, so for that question, I'll just say that velocity is not a particularly good technique for understanding productivity. And what we really need to be focused on is how much value is a team delivering. Estimation only has an impact on that in terms of making decisions. You shouldn't take time to do estimation, though, if it's going to impact the amount of work you get done. So, for example, I said about the bucket system here, that this is maybe, 30 minutes of work for 10 people to estimate 200 items. Well, 30 minutes of work in a sprint is not much, right? It's very reasonable to spend 30 minutes on estimation. But what you should not be doing is spending a day on estimation. If you're taking a whole day to do estimation for a sprint or even a whole project, you're taking way too much time and it's not worth it. Okay, second question. Are there any standards for how many story points for small, medium, large, etc.? Okay, no, there are no standards. In fact, I like that question because this is a question that's good. If you're a Scrum Master or product owner leading a team or a coach, you really need to make that a decision for the team. The team should answer that question. What does small mean? What does medium mean? What does large mean in terms of points? My team is acquainted with estimating tasks by hours, not the size. Is this correct? Well, it's not wrong. Teams are welcome to estimate by hours, but there's a problem with that. The problem is complexity. Again, remember, if we're talking about agile environments where we have complexity, then we know that we're not going to get the right numbers. Our estimates for hours or days are not going to be accurate. They're not accurate. They're not accurate. This is important. Remember this. They're lies. Those estimates are lies. So what does that mean? It means that if your team is struggling to estimate in hours, then stop. Instead, estimate with points because it's often easier for your team members to do that. They often feel more comfortable. You will waste less time on estimating. I've been sizing by FPA and then by hours. So Anita asked this. Anita, I don't know what you mean by FPA. And it looks like someone else asked about that as well. Are you talking about function points? If so, yeah, okay, function points. Okay, so again, in an agile environment, it's not wrong. There's no official agile estimation technique. But remember these principles. These principles are what's important, because if you're trying too hard to estimate hours, you're going to end up spending too much time. Okay, I'm going to say this another way. In an agile environment, we try to deliver value, and estimates are, it's not valuable. Whoops, is not valuable. So here's the thing, like, customers ultimately don't pay you to have good estimates. Your customers pay you to give you good results. That's the fundamentals. Your customers do not pay for estimates, they pay for results. And so in that case, if your estimates are taking a long time and wasting your time and making it so you're having a hard time actually delivering value, stop. On the other hand, if you're using function points and hours and it's working well for you, feel free to continue, no problems. It's okay. All right. Team capacity is planning by man hours. Is it correct? No. Team capacity is not usually done with person hours. It's usually done with points. That's another way of describing the technique of velocity. But remember, that's not estimation. That's actually measurement. And I want to be very clear that for this webinar, we're focused on estimation. Okay. So what happens is we do some planning, we estimate the amount of work that a team can do in any units. It could be points, it could be hours, it could be anything. It doesn't matter. Then they do some work and we check how much work did they actually get done. And then we measure that and we use that to update our plans if we want. I think someone mentioned about, you know, like a weighted average or something like that. Does it mean more business value, more complicated piece, and more days as estimation? No, not necessarily. Sometimes things that are very, very high business value are very, very easy to do. Quick wins, right? So again, the question is, what are our quick wins? Or what is another phrase that's often used is low hanging fruit. Okay. What are the things that have high return on investment? And so that means that high return on investment means we have lots of business value, very little cost. Okay. And we're trying to identify those items with this technique. All right. When you use these techniques, do you only consider the business value PBIs and forget the time taken to do the other PBIs? No, actually, that's what I'm just saying. You take into account both. You take into account effort and impact. Another question about t-shirt sizing. If the goal is to measure an overall project size using t-shirt size, should we measure individuals' work effort, or is there a way to calculate combined group effort for the project? I just want to understand, how do I bring this all together to size a project overall and not one backlog item? Okay, great. So yes, one of the assumptions in most of these techniques, and again, it goes back to these principles that I mentioned, we are looking at collaborative estimates. So what that means is we're never worried about one individual and their capacity. It's not relevant. Okay? Instead, we look at the capacity of the team, right? That's the relevant thing. We're looking at the overall capacity of the team. And so when we do any of these estimation techniques, what we're going to see is that after doing a sprint or an iteration of work, we will see how much work the whole team got done. And we can use that to update our plans. Before that, we're guessing. We don't know how much work the team will do until they actually start working. Okay, more questions. If the story points are estimated on product backlog, is it required to re-estimate during every sprint planning? Okay. No, it's not required to re-estimate. However, the team may choose to re-estimate. Once in a while, they will realize some of their estimates are like really bad. Often our estimates are bad, so we shouldn't worry about it too much. But sometimes our estimates are really bad. And when that happens, yes, the team is welcome to re-estimate, but it doesn't necessarily happen every single sprint. Is impact effort technique a combination of bucket system? Okay, yes, it is kind of a combination. It is a combination of actually any techniques that you can use to estimate business value and that you can use to estimate effort or cost. All right. So that's it for questions. I'm happy to stick around even a little further. Some people might need to leave. I've got about 5 minutes until I have to disconnect myself. I'm willing to hear from people. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow you to unmute yourselves at this point if you wish. You're welcome to ask some questions voice. I may not include these in the video, in the recording, however, if you want to speak. Okay. Any further questions are welcome. I've got about 5 minutes. Otherwise, you're welcome to sign off.
Hi, this is Bhushan.
Hi, Bhushan.
Yes, I just wanted to check with you. Does the estimation technique also depend on what size of the project is?
So good question. It does partially depend. So for larger projects, typically your stakeholders are going to want more firm numbers. So you might use the bucket system with numbers or planning poker with numbers instead of t-shirt size or small, medium, large. Also, for smaller projects, some of the techniques are going to be easier to use because you will have less items to estimate. So, for example, the technique that's called ordering protocol. Sorry, I couldn't remember. The ordering protocol technique is typically better for small projects because it does take a little bit longer. Same with planning poker. Planning poker is better for smaller projects because it takes longer to do.
Hi, Michigan.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Michigan. It's Danny here. How are you?
Yes, Danny, thank you.
Okay, quick question. Kind of related to the other one. Like, how do you know from a practitioner point of view which technique is good for what? And if we were using one technique, should we stay for a certain amount of time to see it maturity, or like judgment-wise, how do we go about that?
Okay, so there's two things that I'll say about that. First of all, I really recommend trying the different techniques and seeing how they work for your particular circumstances, because I don't think there's any like absolute rules here. You know, some techniques are going to work really well for certain teams and situations just based on personalities and how people think, and also on the requirements that you have for your planning and estimation work. On the other hand, there are some principles that I have seen over the years. And what I'll do is, as a follow-up, I'll send a little a set of guidelines. I have some guidelines that I've been working on and I will send a document with some guidelines to participants after this, along with the video.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Mishkin.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, hi, this is Jayant.
Hi, Jayant.
Yeah, the one question is, like you mentioned the estimations about estimation, like the client, you're not getting paid for the estimation, right? But
Yeah.
if the estimations are not accurate, how can one deliver in time for the entire project?
Okay, so I love this question. Estimates do not make reality. Okay, so you're right that, of course, people are going to feel some uncertainty. But actually, the better way to make sure that you're delivering on time is to do just a few simple things. First of all, have good people on your team. If you don't have good people, it doesn't matter what your estimates are, right? Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Number two, very simple. Stop doing wasteful activities like estimation. So let me give you an example. One organization I worked at, they spent 3 months planning a project. You've probably seen something like this. When they started, they had a 2-year deadline. Well, guess what? They were late. How much were they late? They were late by 1.5 months. So actually, if they had started working 3 months earlier and not done any of that planning work, because I know the work, I was there, I saw the work that they were doing. If they had just started earlier, they would have gotten the work done on time. So if you take a long time to do estimation and you delay the start of your work, it's going to be worse. You're going to not be able to meet your deadlines. So that's why I'm saying do your estimation and planning quickly. Don't waste time on it. Just get started. And that's one of the most important things for getting to your deadlines. Final thing I'll say is that there's lots and lots of other things that your teams should be doing. So my expertise is software development. There's many practices that will help you do software development better, that will make your team go faster. And if your team goes faster, you are more likely to hit the deadlines. For example, my colleague Pedram is actually on this call. Pedram, can you show yourself if you're able to? Pedram does training for us for agile engineering practices for software teams. So connect with Pedram if you'd like, or connect with me and I'll connect you with Pedram for ways to make your teams more effective so that they can meet deadlines. Pedram's a good guy. He knows his stuff. He delivered a training just the last week on this topic. And so very, very important concepts. It's much more important to be productive. Now, I apologize. It is now 1 o'clock my local time. I must sign off, but thank you all for your attention, and we will get you the recording when we can. It's likely to be a few weeks, though, at least. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.